Sometimes, a story unfolds in a place you'd least expect, and it leaves an indelible mark. Today, we're going to talk about Wenatchee, Washington, and a tragedy that shook that valley to its core in May of 2025. This is a story that centers on three beautiful little girls: Paityn, who was 9, Evelyn, just 8, and little Olivia, only 5 years old. This is also a story about their father, Travis Decker. He was a military veteran, and his own internal battles, his struggles with mental health would eventually lead to an act so horrific, so unthinkable, that it sparked one of the largest manhunts in the history of Washington state. It all started on a Friday evening, May 30th, 2025. It probably felt like any other Friday for the Decker family, at least at first. Travis Decker, 32 years old, an Army veteran, showed up around 5 p.m. It was his scheduled time to pick up his 3 daughters for visitation, a routine he and his ex-wife, Whitney, had established as part of their co-parenting arrangement, something that had happened countless times. But this Friday was going to be terrifyingly different. 8 o'clock rolled around. That was the time the girls were supposed to be back with their mother, but Whitney's phone stayed silent. She tried calling Travis again and again, but every single call went straight to voicemail. Now, this wasn't like him. Despite his known struggles with mental health and his living situation being pretty unstable, Travis had always communicated if there was a change of plans. By 9:45 p.m., Whitney's growing worry had exploded into full-blown panic. She did what any terrified mother would do. She called the police. What investigators found out next set off immediate alarm bells. They checked flock camera footage, those cameras that capture license plates. And there it was, Travis's white GMC pickup truck, driving out of Wenatchee around 5:40 p.m. That was just 40 minutes after he'd picked up the girls, and this was a direct violation of their parenting agreement. That agreement specifically, clearly, said he was not allowed to take the children outside the Wenatchee Valley. So, the Wenatchee Police Department quickly put in a request for an Amber Alert with the Washington State Patrol. But this is where you see the really tough spot law enforcement can be in. The initial decision came back. There wasn't, at that moment, sufficient evidence that the children were at immediate risk of serious harm. That's the incredibly high bar for an Amber Alert. It actually wasn't until late Saturday afternoon, May 31st, that an Endangered Missing Persons Alert was finally issued. And what triggered it? The girls had missed a 5K run they were scheduled for that morning, something their father, despite everything, would never have let them skip. It was just another deeply concerning red flag in a rapidly growing list. Monday, June 2nd, that's when the news every parent dreads, the news everyone had been hoping, against hope not to hear, finally came. Travis's white GMC pickup was found. It was abandoned near the Rock Island campground in Chelan County, about 130 miles east of Seattle. The truck itself was empty, but the scene around it told a horrific story. About 75 yards from that truck, authorities made the most devastating discovery imaginable. The 3 little girls. They were found deceased. The preliminary findings were just brutal. They indicated the girls had been restrained and had died from asphyxiation. The horror of it all was compounded by what was found scattered around the campsite: personal belongings, camping gear, and even Travis's own wallet. And perhaps the most chilling piece of information to emerge was from the digital trail. Travis's phone had been pinging in that exact remote area on Saturday, May 31st. This suggested that the unthinkable, the absolute worst, had likely happened much earlier than when their bodies were actually discovered. To even try and make sense of how something this tragic could happen, we need to look at the man at the center of it. Travis Caleb Decker was born on August 15th, 1992, in Pewaukee, Wisconsin. He'd served his country as a U.S. Army infantryman from March 2013 to July 2021. That service included a deployment to Afghanistan in 2014. After his active duty, he joined the Washington National Guard. Reports suggest he'd been removed from the elite Ranger Regiment after failing Ranger School, but his military training was still extensive. He was described as being very skilled in wilderness survival, someone capable of living outdoors for long stretches with hardly any supplies. But underneath all that military training, there were clearly some deep, visible struggles. Travis had been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and also post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Court documents revealed that he'd actually been ordered to undergo mental health treatment and domestic violence counseling. He refused both. He also wouldn't sign the court-imposed parenting plan, the very plan designed to protect his children. Travis and Whitney had been married for 10 years before their divorce in March 2023, and initially, their co-parenting relationship actually seemed to be working. Whitney's attorney even described them as communicating regularly, almost like friends. Travis was seen as an active father, someone who genuinely loved his daughters. But then, by late 2024, these really concerning patterns started to emerge. Travis's living situation became increasingly unstable. He was often homeless, living out of his truck, or in just temporary places. Whitney, understandably alarmed, filed to modify their parenting plan, and she cited several very troubling incidents. There was one time Travis just said he didn't want the girls for a weekend visit. Another incident involved 5-year-old Olivia, who got her fingers injured while she was unsupervised at a military facility where Travis was staying. Whitney reported that the girls came back from that visit crying, just uncontrollably. The court sided with Whitney. They found what they called limiting factors of neglect and emotional and physical problems against Travis. They ordered a psychiatric evaluation, mandatory mental health counseling, and they prohibited any overnight visits. And most critically, they barred him from taking the children outside the Wenatchee Valley. These were the very conditions, the very safeguards that Travis refused to accept. Following that horrific discovery of the girls' bodies, law enforcement launched what would become one of the largest search operations in Washington state history. We're talking over 100 police officers from a multitude of agencies, all joining the hunt. The FBI, US Marshals, Border Patrol tactical units, even the Air National Guard. Governor Bob Ferguson authorized the release of emergency funds and the deployment of National Guard resources to support the effort. The search focused intensely on the remote and rugged terrain of the Wenatchee River Ranger District, an area so challenging that popular hiking destinations like the Enchantments had to be closed to the public. The challenge they faced was immense. Travis's military training, his survival skills, meant he could potentially stay hidden in that wilderness for months. His own relatives confirmed he was capable of living outdoors for very long periods, which just made the search in such a vast, difficult area incredibly tough. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered some really disturbing evidence of premeditation in Travis's digital footprint. In the days leading up to this tragedy, his Google search history showed he'd been looking up things like how to relocate to Canada, finding jobs there, how to move across borders. These searches painted a chilling picture of someone who was planning to run, planning an escape. The public response was huge. Over 500 tips poured into authorities. A $20,000 reward was offered for any information that could lead to his arrest. And yet, despite this massive effort, despite all the community involvement, Travis Decker remained elusive. By June 24, 2025, that was nearly a month after this nightmare began, the search had started to evolve. Authorities had to acknowledge they had no definitive proof that Travis Decker was even still alive, or if he was even still in that area. Some of the resources began to shift towards the grim possibility of recovering his remains, with plans to bring in cadaver dogs. The thought that he might have perished out there in that rugged wilderness, it was becoming more and more likely with each passing day. But, until they had proof, he remained officially considered armed and extremely dangerous. Travis faces charges of 3 counts of first-degree murder, 3 counts of first-degree kidnapping, and aggravated first-degree murder. There is no possibility of bail. The Wenatchee Valley tragedy is one of those stories that just defies any easy understanding. It's a raw, painful reminder that behind every single headline about violence and loss, there are real people. Whitney Decker has expressed one simple, heartbreaking wish: that the world remember her daughters not for the horrific way they died, but for the light, the laughter, and the love they brought into this world. Paityn, Evelyn, and Olivia Decker deserved so much more than the fate that befell them. As the search for Travis Decker continues, we can only hope that these innocent souls receive the justice they so rightfully deserve. Thank you for being with me on Truly Chilling as we walked through this incredibly difficult and heartbreaking case out of Wenatchee. These stories are never easy to tell or to hear, but we believe it's important to understand the human impact behind the headlines. In the end, I just want to say, please take care of yourselves and of those around you. Thank you for listening, and I'll connect with you in the next one.